You'll have to excuse me, it's really hot here. It is almost 40 degrees Celsius, which is just hot. I am frazzled, I'm hiding inside, and I'm still boiling. And we're just gonna go with it. We're gonna try and beat the heat with some reading. Here we go. It's Karen, and I'm going to try the first chapter of 3 books to determine my next read. For the Irilium Readathon, I need to find for my Psionics and Divination class a book that has time travel, and I searched far and wide for ones that I might be interested in and ones that are kind of in my periphery. So I have The Anubis Gates, Tales from the Cafe, and The Girl from Everywhere. Today I'm going to try reading the first chapter of all of these books, and then I'm going to check in with you and see how it's going, and hopefully at the end of it I will be picking what book to read. The first book that I'm going to start with is Tales from the Cafe. This is the second book in this series. It's a translated work. The first one I read last year is called Before the Coffee Gets Cold. It's a lovely short little book, little vignettes of different stories. The idea goes thusly. There is a cafe and you can order a coffee. If you sit in a specific part of the cafe, that coffee, in some kind of magic-y way, you're able to time travel back to some point in time. From the first book, I thought it was okay. It was quaint, it was lovely. The things tackled were hard, but still had that kind of cozy feeling, so I almost felt like it didn't quite delve as deep as I wanted it to. So we'll see how this one stacks up, the first chapter. If the first chapter ends up being really long, I'm just going to be reading for 10 minutes. Okay, we're back. I just finished 10 minutes of reading because I forgot, yes, these chapters are very long. It's like 30, 50 pages. I'm reading it on my Libby app, and it's not exactly accurate with page numbers, so I'm just going to ignore that. The first part that I read does a really, really good job summing up exactly what happens in the rules. We're first introduced to the character of Gotaro Chiba, and he's this 51-year-old man who's got a secret. He's lied to his daughter her whole life, and I don't know if he wants to tell her the truth. We haven't really determined that yet. But basically it's revealed what the lie is almost immediately, and that he wants to go into the past, maybe to talk to somebody, talk to his friend. It basically sums up the whole vibe, the cozy vibe, and it gives you the rules of the time traveling. Only people who have been to the cafe you can visit. So if that person has never been to the cafe, you can't encounter them. The second rule is you cannot change anything that will affect the present. There's nothing you can do to actually change anything. You're basically going and observing. The third rule is kind of fun. There is always one customer sitting in the seat where you can time travel, and it's only when they get up to go to the washroom can you go and sit in that chair. And this customer only uses the washroom once a day. And I'm not going to reveal much more to that because it reveals it in the first book. So if you haven't read the first book, then you won't know what I'm talking about. And if you do, you do. The fourth rule is you cannot move from that seat. And the fifth rule is where the title comes from on the first one, is that when the coffee is poured, that is when your time travel experience begins. And when the coffee gets cold, that is when it ends. It must only be poured by one particular person, and that is Kazu Takeda. So this does a really good job of setting up and reminding me exactly of how the vibe of the book is. I have no idea who any of the characters are. I don't really remember much, even though I read this last year. It seems to me like it's maybe pretty forgettable. I am intrigued. I do want to find out what happens to Gotaro and if he ends up telling his daughter the truth. This Seems like it's going to be a really fast read. I looked at the Libby and it does like a prediction of when you're going to finish it, and I'm already 10% of the way through after 10 minutes of reading, which is great. So it's a fast read. So if I'm struggling to read, this would be a good one to pick up. Let's jump right into my second read, and that is The Girl from Everywhere. This is some kind of a nautical theme, which is in my wheelhouse right now. So they go on some kind of ship, and the ship takes them all the way through time. And then we'll see how far we get. The Girl from Everywhere. Pretty good chapter 1. Action-packed, a little info dumpy, but ultimately my intrigue level is peaked. So we have this main character, whom I didn't get her name, but they're in Calcutta 17 something or other, and they're trying to get this bird called the Calidarius, which apparently if you look at it or it looks you in the eye, it can cure you of anything. She's trying to haggle, then this handsome, charming man called Kashmir comes up, and he basically kind of steals the bird, and then they have to like run off with it. So there's a chase scene, and then they run to the boat, and they get on the boat, and now they're traveling to New York, 1981. It seems like the rule of this time travel is that they can only go places where they have the map to it. So this ship called Temptation brings them to the places that they need to go depending on what maps they have. So hand-drawn seems to be okay. And they're currently looking for a specific map, a specific year for Honolulu in Hawaii, and we're not exactly sure why. There were a lot of literary references, which was kind of fun, but could get a little bit tiresome. Of course, my prediction is that Kashmir is the love interest, because of course he is a pickpocket and a charming sir who calls her Amira. And I'm pretty sure Amira means princess, in sort of like an Arabic. So ultimately, I think right now, my interest is more with The Girl from Everywhere, even though I'm tempted to read The Tales from the Cafe because it is so short. So let's read the first chapter or first 10 minutes of The Anubis Gates, and let's see which one I'm going to ultimately go with. I'm going to be honest with you. In this book, there's a prologue. I've try a chapter before, and with any SFF works, whenever there's a prologue, I usually skip it. Here's why. I find the prologue usually gives context to something way later in the book, and sometimes I find the prologue ends up being rather dry. This might not be the case with this one, but I skipped it anyway, and I'm really glad that I did, because I read 10 minutes of chapter 1, because chapter 1 seems to be ridiculously long. I'm not exactly sure of the time travel element. There is nothing alluded to just yet. We're following a man called Brendan Doyle, which is just the most like generic name you can think of, and I kind of love it. And he's arrived at this headquarters of this man called Mr. Darrow. He's been whisked away from his place, I think in California, to pick up some kind of a job that has to do with Samuel Taylor Coleridge. It's not really expanded on of what that job is, because I think we're going to be figuring it out as we go. The name of the place where he's been dropped off, this company, had me laughing. It is called Darrow Interdisciplinary Research Enterprises. The initialism is, of course, Dyer, which, okay, it's just funny. Why would you want your company to be Dyer? But anyway, so apparently this company has existed since the 1930s. We are in 1991. It was really big, and it rivaled, they said, IBM and Honeywell, and then it just sort of drifted off and kind of disappeared into obscurity. So we don't really know what's going on. Brendan gets dropped off, and he's led into this building there's a bunch of construction going on, and he's sat down with Mr. Darrow. Mr. Darrow starts quizzing him, like, do you know Samuel Coleridge Taylor? Like, do you know him? Not just like pick up a book and know of him, but like the timeline of his life. And this is where I think the time travel is going to come in. I think he's going to jump back in time to Samuel Taylor Coleridge. We are given a little bit of a hint to Brendan's life. He's had this traumatic event where his lover, wife, woman, partner, Rebecca, has died in some scary accident that haunts him still, and he wishes he could change it. Is that a gun on the mantelpiece? Who knows? Ultimately, I really, really loved the writing of this book. It's got a very, like, action-oriented feeling. You know, there's some mystery as to why he's being hired for this job. We're getting a little bit of his background. It just feels like one of those, like, action movies that starts off and our hero's gonna, like, save the day. He's gonna get hired by, we're gonna be like FBI, and we're gonna travel through time. Like, it's got that vibe, and that might be really fun to read, and I am really looking for a fun book right now. In summation, I decided, I had a quick reflection on the 3 books and how I was going to decide which one to read. Now, I might change my mind when I get to it, but what I decided to look at was the writing and my intrigue. So how much I enjoyed the writing, did the writing flow, and how much I was intrigued to keep going. So for the Tales from the Cafe, I gave it a 3 for writing. It's there. There's no like sparkle to it, but it is telling a tale. And for intrigue, I also gave it a 3. I am interested to find out what happens to Gotaro, but not enough that I could start reading it right now. The Girl from Everywhere, the writing, I gave a 3 out of 5. It reads smoothly, it reads fine. There's just something missing from it, and maybe as I go into it more, I might like it a little bit more. I gave it a 4 out of 5 for intrigue because I am really interested to find out how this time travel works, how the mapping works, and if there's going to be action just like there was in that first chapter, I'm all for that. The Anubis Gates, I gave a 5 out of 5 for the writing. It flowed so nicely, so smoothly. I was completely sucked in. And then for intrigue, I was a 4 out of 5 for me. I am really curious as to see how the time travel is used in this. Looking at the numbers there, I guess we're going with the Anubis Gates, which is the bigger choice out of all of them. However, I'm hoping because the writing in chapter 1 just seemed so smooth and read so nicely for me that it will be one that I fly through. At this moment in time, I am really going to be starting the Anubis Gates. I'm going to keep reading. We're going to see how this goes, and I'm really excited because this is also a book on my bucket list. A while ago, I wrote up a bunch of books that I might be interested in: classic science fiction, classic fantasy, classics, just anything classic. And this was one that came up as a classic time travel. I'm in. I'm all in. Thanks for watching this hot, sticky, frazzled time travel adventure. I'm the Book Libranaut. I like exploring books, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.